Welcome back to Off the Chair, where we say the quiet parts out loud about running a practice. So today's episode is about the people we trusted, the hires we regretted, and the systems that would have saved us from heartbreak. If you've ever paid someone more than yourself or lost sleep over an employee, you're in the right place today.
We've all done it. You ignore that pit in your stomach, hoping the person you hired will magically turn it around. Spoiler, they usually don't. A bad hire doesn't just cost you money, it can cost you your sanity, your culture, and even your clients. Today, we're unpacking the hires that nearly broke us.
This one's for every clinician turned boss who thought hiring would be the answer, only to realize it created a whole new set of problems. We're breaking down delegation disasters, leadership fails, and the lessons that will keep your practice and your peace of mind intact. Okay, today we're talking about hiring disasters. So you'll get a little schadenfreude today if you're listening and you're like, man, it's not just me that's doing this. Everybody else is making these mistakes out there too. And I used to hear that saying, what is it? Hire slow, fire fast. Have you guys heard that?
Yeah, I've heard that.
It has never been more true than ever for me now. What about you guys? What are you going into this episode with today? Are you kind of wanting to give the viewers just a sense of like normalcy of it's okay? Is it you've got some stories, you got some tea to spill, or what comes up for you when you hear this topic that we're getting ready to jump into?
I think I want people to understand that this is just the reality of what it is. And you kind of go through a learning process yourself of learning, through trial and error of what works. And I think, sharing some bad hire stories. I have a few, especially with admin. So I'd like to share that and at least let people know that even if they're experiencing it, it can definitely get better.
Yeah. So who wants to start?
Well, I've definitely had the admins that I have hired to support the practice and, find out that something else is going on behind the scenes.
And behind the scenes, do you mean like they're working another job?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think during the time of the pandemic, one of the first admins I hired definitely had another job that they may have been doing simultaneous because I could never reach them. They were fully remote, but I could never get in touch or get a timely response. So ultimately, we had a heart to heart and, they chose to leave. But I've also had the experience of hiring a VA who I later found out was in Europe. So it didn't really work out that well because they were answering all of our phone calls and emails from a very vastly different time zone. So that was a bit challenging to navigate and figure out. And I think it was definitely something they were concealing that information from me as to their actual location. So that was a little challenging.
Except they would answer at like 2 a.m. Donkey Shane.
There were a lot of overnight emails, and that's how I caught on, burning the midnight oil.
I think more and more people can get away with working two jobs. And Mike, my husband who's in sales, has a lot of people that do that. And it's, they call it double dipping. Because in this remote landscape, unless the employer is tracking their time, how would you know? How would you know if someone's not working for you full time?
It's pretty difficult.
Where do you guys fall? Where do you guys fall on that idea of time tracking? Are you with it? Are you against it?
I think some time tracking has to happen. I mean, we're learning, we now have two VAs, so this is all new to us. I was kind of against having remote workers. It took some time for me to get on board. It's been working well, but we definitely have, we know when they're on, we have a time tracking feature and we have like an end of the day report. And I know I have staff check in with them during the day just so we know and hold them accountable. I think one of the hardest lessons as a group owner that I've noticed is that the damage of having the wrong hire and how long it can take you to admit it is pretty bad. I don't know. For me, that's something that I definitely experienced. And I've had an easier time. I don't know about you guys. Hiring therapists has been easier for me. I feel like they know their craft, they love their clients. We can usually match them with the right fit of our practice. But oh man, that's where I've been burned the most is with admins.
Okay. So less so with therapists, which makes sense because therapists are sort of like our artist, right? They
Yeah,
have their craft, as you mentioned, and their their approach, their lens by which they conceptualize a case, their treatment method, and assuming they, were trained well, there's going to be a group of clients that really enjoy and form a relationship with that therapist and find it therapeutic. And that's really all you have to worry about. And it's very easy to see if they're doing a good job or not, right? You look at their
right,
churn rate, you see, are they churning out clients and clients turning over, or are they coming
right.
back every week? But for the people that aren't clinical, I do think that's where you can hide a little bit. So when you talk about your admin, what are some things that either you experienced or noticed that were just fails, maybe, that now having that experience, you would do something differently?
Yeah, I remember catching one admin who would just let the phone ring endlessly, no urgency, no ownership. Calls went to voicemail, clients weren't followed up with. And meanwhile, I was thinking they're doing everything right at the time, but I knew referrals were down, but I didn't understand. But unless at that time I was sitting physically next to them to listen, I wouldn't know. And I actually got one of the reasons we got the CRM therapy flow was because of this bad hire, because I realized, oh, wait, I need to know and be able to jump in and see every email, every text message, every phone call, because we really just had a bad experience with this one person. And this one person, too, had a lot of other issues. There was a lot of attendance issues where she was constantly calling out, she's rolling in late. And, something I think therapists do, or at least I did, is I over empathized
Mhm.
with her. I knew she was going through a hard time. I knew she was going through a divorce. I knew she had a sick child. I knew she had a flat tire. Like, for the longest time, I think I was like definitely being compassionate towards her. And I really shouldn't have been because I feel like at the end of the day, I was almost enabling her. And I
Mm.
think that's like a trap that therapists get into is we're wired to empathize and we're trained to see the best in people. And I think that really doesn't hold true as a business owner. I think it can
Hmm.
blind us.
And people can take advantage of it.
I
Yeah.
agree that that tension between the empathy and concern versus, accountability, or, holding folks accountable for the job tasks and duties that they've signed up to do can be really challenging. I hear you on that.
Yeah. We had somebody that was really horrible for 2 years and like they weren't the right fit. And like looking back, I can't even believe I let this happen for 2 years. You know, I kept thinking it was us. Oh, we didn't train her well. Oh, I need to be more flexible. I expect too much of people. And looking back, it was just the wrong person in the wrong role. And I just
Mm.
can't believe I let that go on so long.
Do you think that you let it go on that long because you were so busy doing other things? You're like, all right, you got to figure this out. Or do you think that you didn't want to have that hard conversation, which is, I don't think that this is a fit?
I think the hard conversation. And I knew how hard it was to find someone. So I was like, geez, I have to I don't even have anybody if I get rid of her. Like I felt kind of handcuffed. Like I need her. It's almost like you need the bad person until you can find somebody who can fill the role.
I know for
Hmm.
me, I probably kept a lot of, roles in the practice to myself for far too long. So by the time I was ready to hand off the admin, like say the intake coordinator position, I wanted like nothing to do with it because I was just over it. So that probably meant that I just wasn't paying enough attention. And I think finding that tension between giving, good onboarding, good training, and independence, but also frequent check-ins seems to be really important. And right now I have an admin and intake coordinator whom I meet with once a week for 45 minutes to an hour, which seems like a long time, but it really has made the difference in our flow. And when she has questions, she can ask me, and we can, message between those meetings to make sure we're keeping in touch. So I found a nice balance at this point, but I think that can be really difficult to achieve.
Yeah, and I think that's a trap that most therapists fall into because we're so burned out that whenever we eventually have the hire,
Yep,
we're like, here you go,
exactly.
take it. I don't even want to look at it
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah.
It feels so
Right.
liberating, to not wear every single hat at some point. So then you're willing to take it off too quickly and, let them run with it a little too far.
Right.
Yeah, I've been reading Elon Musk's biography, and I read a lot of biographies. I feel like I learn a lot from different people. And he has a very different style of hiring, of leadership. And I'm not necessarily saying that this is right, but it's a radically different way of thinking, and one that I think you always sort of need a course correction when anything starts to skew too far to the right, too far to the left. And in the course of the pandemic, of course, we got a lot of everybody needs to feel safe, psychological safety in the workplace. We had a lot of just making sure everybody feels good. And it got away from the focus of the output, right? Like, great, she feels great. Is she answering your phones, right?
Yeah.
And especially, I know living in California, it's really hard to be a small business owner in California. The laws are just written so in favor of the employee that you have to be careful even how you're forming job posts, right? Because you can get in trouble that way. And you're trying to hire people, right? You're trying to get people employment. But there are so many laws that I feel like are written against the employer. And unless you're a big employer, right, where you've got big lawyers designed to protect you, not only are you fighting this battle of now you're a clinician, but you're also supposed to be a leader and a culture builder and a hirer and a firer, but you've got to have an employment lawyer next to you all day long going, don't do that, don't say that, ooh, I wouldn't do that, because you can get in trouble. And people become many litigators in this society, understanding how to use the laws against the employer. I'll give you an example. I had 2 intake coordinators during COVID, and we were at the time paying them 100 hours a pay period. So our pay period is 2 weeks, typically 40 hours a week, 80 hours. Each were getting 100 hours. So that means they were getting time and a half overtime. And I started to notice that our practice was also getting raked over the coals at the same time. So social media, patients were taking to Yelp, every outlet you could imagine, saying, no one answers the phone here. No one gets back to you. This isn't a real place. And to me, it didn't add up because we've got 2 people billing us 100 hours every 2 weeks. That doesn't make sense. So I got into Ring Central and I looked at the call analytics, which is really nice if anyone has never looked at that, which I was surprised that I had it for years and never looked at it. It tells you your answer rate for your phone and how many people are calling, how many inquiries you're getting a day. And we had a 87% no answer rate. So that means 87 out of 100 calls were going unanswered. And we were paying thousands of dollars a week for these 2 people to work. So when I got a practice manager who was the person that was in charge of let's figure out what's going on, the first thing she did is said, let's all have a Zoom meeting. And the person had their camera off. Now that's just a bad sign. First off, if you're meeting with an employee who's remote and their camera is off, in this day and age, there should be no excuse for a camera not working. And you'll get every excuse in the book. There was a windstorm. We've had so many windstorms. at Clarity Psychological. So many windstorms. I mean, wind has been a very big problem for us. And I have found myself actually looking at wind maps to see, is there an actual power outage? And there's not. So the practice manager met with this person, and there were kids all in the background. It was noisy. This person was annoyed that they had to be on camera. And they said, well, what about the agreement that you signed when you came to work for us? You know, you have to be HIPAA compliant. You have to work in a room that's free from distraction. You can't have anybody else in the room. It needs to be quiet. And they said, well, I have 3 kids. I don't know what you want me to do. And they quit the next day. So having the simple accountability conversation can be difficult in this day and age. It can, you know, you can be seen as the person in the wrong, even when you're like, I'm just making sure that we're compliant here. So that has become a real point of frustration for me. I think in the age that we're living in, where it's just so difficult to find people that are truly accountable and are looking to make a difference in an organization versus I want a position where I can hide. I can kick the can a little bit and get paid, but then like also stay at home with my kids and then, you know, I'll just like every once in a while log in.
I think it's really important to utilize the hiring documents as tools. The job description, the offer letter that you give to your employees. I've had the experience many times where I will go back to and reference the offer letter, and the employee gives me kind of a blank look like that. And, you know, I have to say, well, like, way back when we went through the interview process and you submitted this to me, you know, you agreed to what's in this letter. And so these are the standards that I'm holding you to. And still the confusion can endure. And I've been using that as a you know, jumping off point to bring that up more frequently with employees to help them understand that, hey, just like we have a contract for services with the clients, this is our contract for services, you know, and I need to hold you accountable for what you signed up for, what you signed on for. And if, you know, you don't agree with it, then we need to go back to the drawing board and maybe discuss what your expectations are and how they're not matching up with the framework that I've offered to you as an employee. And those can be pretty challenging conversations, but I think they can bring, you know, good accountability and understanding between, you know, a supervisor and an employee.
Yeah. I think when you're in a position to have that conversation in that way, that's such a huge difference than where I probably started off, which was just biting my tongue. I didn't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable. I didn't want to make anyone feel bad. I think that's the therapist in us. You know, we were like, oh, she's trying. Like, this is her first job out of college. Like, tell her she's doing a good job, you know?
Or first
And
job out of grad school.
so there's that pull. Yeah. Yeah. And you're like, I remember when I was that age, like, I just wanted someone to be like, you're doing a good job, Colleen. And so there's the human part of us that, and the therapist part of us that wants people to feel good and comfortable and part of a culture. But then there's also the leadership part of us that is looking at the P&L and going, our reputation's going down, our inquiries are going down. And who's at the front gates?
Yeah, or you sign on for, I mean, another thing that affects the P&L. You sign folks on to see a certain number of clients and fulfill, have a certain whole carry a caseload, a full-time caseload, and you know, they're struggling to meet those numbers. And I think there's a lot more reasons for that than just I'm not getting enough referrals, which is something you can sometimes hear from therapist staff. I think that can be a challenge as well because it affects the overall revenue for the practice. And, you know, sometimes my experience has been that folks want to work at their own pace in a way that suits their lifestyle, but still reap the benefits, the full-time benefits from the practice. And those, again, are also difficult conversations to have.
Yeah. Those are indeed really hard conversations to have with your therapist. And sometimes the benefit of being a therapist is that we can appreciate difference in perspectives, difference in values. Like most clinicians that are going to come to work for someone else aren't thinking, how am I going to make the most money? Right? Because if they want to make the most money, the truth is you have to work for yourself. Most therapists that are going to come to work for you, their value is somewhere else, whether it be more time. So they want more time back to themselves. They don't want to be on the phone with insurance companies and dealing with hiring billers for their practice. They just want to see their clients and be able to sign off at the end of the day. And so they value that time. They value peace. They value being able to just do their craft and nothing else, and not having to learn all these other trades that we're having to learn. And sometimes they value the culture. They value having a nice group of people that they like working with every day, that they like seeing. So how do you guys gauge what each employee's sort of values are and being able to motivate them into the direction that you need them to go?
We actually have a pretty open discussion about values during the hiring process. We just kind of put it out there now. Like, these are our values. These are important to us. We have certain questions we ask to see if they align. I mean, of course, people can always say certain things in theory and maybe not practice it. We've also been a little bit more creative in the hiring process, where we will ask people now to submit a video with their resume, just because I want to make sure that they can follow their directions. How are they presenting themselves? How are they speaking? Not that that's necessarily with values, but it is to a point. I've had people who have been in their pajamas in their bed submit a video, and I'm like, okay, like, you're not putting your best
like,
professional foot forward.
I have a therapist.
This is not going to happen. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think as business owners, we have to get creative to find ways to figure out if these people are going to align with our values.
That's a great idea. I've had to get on the case of, staff at times for conducting sessions with clients in bed, but, showing up in your own pajamas to an interview.
Yeah. When you've had time to prepare, you've actually had time to prepare and submit a video. It's like you have nothing but time to present yourself well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's bad.
We haven't gone so far to have the pajama party practice yet, Therapy in our pajamas.
Yeah. Therapy from the bathtub,
Well, and it's a weird line, right? Because I know with my therapy clients, I mean, some I had seen for 10 years, right? They were like family at that point. It was very easy. The Zoom transition was very easy. I was like, what are you doing? Oh, is that Bickles, your cat? Like, I knew every intimate part of their whole life. So those, I felt a little bit more comfortable. I wasn't like, I'm going to put on a full thing of makeup today, or like, I need to be in like my office. I could, be on a walk and be talking to that person. And I knew they would still get the value. But there is an interesting juxtaposition there with our field. And like, a lot of people are working out of their bedroom, and they're like, this is where all the magic happens. Now tell me about you and your husband's sex life. It's like a weird, they're like, is that where my therapist has sex? So it's just this weird, right? That's a weird time that we're living in. Normally you would go into your therapist's office and you just see them in a chair and assume that that's where they live. And then you see like, oh my God, they like have a whole life. And so I think it introduces a whole new layer that we weren't even prepared for in grad school.
Absolutely.
That's neither here nor there.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't care in most cases if what my clients show up wearing, if they want to wear their pajamas, I might wear my, alpaca poncho left over from when I was a, pandemic therapist. But I think it's okay to ask for a level of professionalism like in an interview process, like Jen was talking about.
Right.
Now, what do you
So,
both do
oh,
in
go ahead.
terms of like tools and systems? Is there anything that you guys do in order to hire the right people?
So I'll tell you what I did last week, and then I'll back that up with how I learned that lesson. So I had a practice manager, and now I always say this is a trial. It's a 90-day trial. So in California and Massachusetts, where my businesses are, it's all at will employment. So technically you can terminate anyone at any time. But I want them to understand that this is a working interview. For the next 90 days, I'm seeing how you work and I'm figuring out if it's going to be a fit. It's not you just now got this guaranteed job and it's yours to lose. So the practice manager that I hired and fired within 3 weeks. And the old me would not have been able to do that. I would have let her keep working for probably 6 months to 8 months and then been like, oh, this isn't a fit. So, one piece that I learned the hard way is the difference between delegation and abdication. When I was really overwhelmed a couple years ago, I was wanting to abdicate. I would have told you I was wanting to delegate, but I was wanting to abdicate. I was wanting to take all this stuff on my plate and then just give it to someone else and be like, here you go. And as a result, I made the wrong hire. This person was not capable of handling the task because I didn't even really define the tasks or know what a good way of handling it was to measure. And so the interviews looked something like, do you know how to design and develop KPIs? And they would go, yeah. Okay, next question. And that was the end. And then what those KPIs looked like when I checked in with that person, who was the COO, by the way. We're not talking about like an admin that's answering phones for you. This is the person that I put in charge of entire operations of the practice. When I checked in and said, okay, we lost our biller, we lost our practice manager, all within the course of a month since she started working there. That should have been the first red flag, right? Everybody's leaving. This person is not gelling with the team. So she hired 2 new people. And I said, how's it going? And she said, Colleen, I'm so impressed with the synergy. I am just so impressed. And after that call, I sort of patted myself on the back and I was like, you did it. She's got it. She knows what she's doing. She's seasoned. You've hired someone that's smarter than you are in this area, and she's going to take it to a level that you wouldn't have been able to. The biller quit that next week after a week of working at our company, and the practice manager went on a mental health leave. Again, now we're at 4 people that we've lost.
Yeah,
as
that's
a
a
result
lot of
of working
people
with this
to
person.
lose. Yeah.
Right. So my gut started to turn a little bit at that point. I was like, something's not right here. But the odd thing is as I was talking to this person who was really well heeled, they would almost talk down to me like, Colleen, I've been through a lot of these situations, a lot worse than where we're at right now. There's no need to worry. And so I would then second guess myself and kind of go back to my life and be like, maybe I'm just neurotic. Maybe I'm just kind of a spaz. Like maybe I need to just work on my own stuff because this person seems to have it figured out. Meanwhile, I had a business mentor who was looking at my numbers and going, Colleen, this isn't good. Like you don't have enough cash flow to make payroll in the next 3 months. What is her plan for this? And so it was these two conflicting worlds, right? And I didn't know who to listen to, who to believe. And so now, and obviously, that wasn't a fit. It didn't work out. It caused a lot of chaos, disruption, organizational. It was like a deck of cards. Everybody left. It was a hard, hard year to recover from that hire. This new person that I brought in, like you, Jen, I've learned to start at a more practical level. Like I'm not like, you're the COO and the board member, and I'm giving you 47% control of my company. No, I'm like, we're going to start at practice manager and let's see what you can do. And I'll keep on growing that role the more valuable you are to the organization. This person wasn't able to log on to their Zoom. First off, like when we're having just a normal meeting, like, how's it going? She's like, oh, I'm having camera issues today. That's always the first sign, people. If there's someone that's having technical issues, I mean, listen, it happens every once in a while, but it doesn't happen that much. There should be really no excuse for you getting on your camera and it working and the sound working, all that kind of stuff. So I thought, ooh, that's not good. And then when I started to notice that I felt like things weren't being done, but it was just a hunch. It wasn't really, I didn't have any metrics. So what I did is I created a daily, which is a trick I learned from one of my old billers, where she said, when I handle my billing team, I have dailies that I give them and weeklies. So every day they have to do these things, and every week they have to do these things. And I loved how she had already crafted for each person that worked for her exactly what they needed to do, an SOP essentially, to be successful in that role. And that to me is the difference between delegation and abdication. You first have to know what is going to go into that role to make it successful. And then you have the metrics for the person to say, I need you to do this. So that turned into dailies for this practice manager where I would say, I just every day at the end of the day, I just want you to mark how many calls did we get? What was the lead conversion percentage? You know, how many converted to clients and how many thought they were calling their chiropractor's office? And how much in collections did our billing team do? How much in patient collections did they do? You know, basic things. After a week, it wasn't filled out. That's the second piece is oversight of those KPIs. Sometimes we get to that stage where we can put things in place of things that we want people to do. And as leaders who are juggling multiple things, you go on to something else. You're working on your logo the next week and you're meeting with the person you forgot that you gave them KPIs. Well, those KPIs aren't necessarily valuable if you're not having oversight into that, or someone else is not having oversight into that they're getting done. And sometimes people, you have to remind them multiple times to look at said dailies or KPIs or whatever. So those would be my two biggest takeaways from the hiring disasters that I've had was understanding how to delegate, what it takes to be successful in that role, right? And then oversight of that delegation. If not you, who is going to oversee that that person is doing those things that you've asked them to do?
That's such a good point, Colleen, because so many people will delegate and then not look at it. And it's not even looking at it, it's also measuring it, analyzing it. It's not just a quick check in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd say for the hiring process, I think what I've learned to do is build in more and more steps. Obviously you start off, submit a resume. I really like the idea of the video that you shared, Jen. References, recommendation letters if possible. And then I ask applicants to fill out a survey that sort of is tailored for the practice. If that looks good, then I move to a phone screen, which is about 15 minutes. And then after that, if it's looking like it will be a good match, I will invite them in for an interview. I've thought about adding additional steps and stages to the interview process, but that's kind of where I'm at with it right now. So, but I like having numerous different opportunities to meet and see applicants in, different contexts before I ask them to join the team.
Yeah, sometimes we'll ask them to stop by group supervision, while during the interview process, just to see if they'll even show up and what the dynamic is about meeting other staff.
I've thought about that. I've heard of practices also asking folks to do a case presentation, come in and share, obviously, anonymized information about a client or a client case they've worked on. I think that could be interesting in terms of getting a feel for staff culture and how people might fit in with the group.
Now, what do you guys think about firing fast and the emotional cost?
Do you mean the emotional cost to the person that you're firing, or the emotional cost to you or to
To
your
you? Yeah, I guess
practice?
I mean to us and the practice.
Mm, I've always interpreted that hiring slow, firing fast as you got to just do it and move on. You can't think about it. And that's so hard for a psychologist to do, right? Because everything that we do is analyzed and thought about, especially our thumbprint on humanity, right? I'm constantly
Yeah.
like, are you leaving the world a better place? Like, are people going to show up to your funeral? Or are they going to be like, she was mean? She was an Ebenezer Scrooge, So I'm always thinking about that impact. And I feel at this point, and this could be just because I'm older and tired, that you don't have the bandwidth to hold the negativity or the fallout that comes from having to fire someone. You just have to be able to do it and move on and treat each day like a new day.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, a business mentor once told me something that really stuck with me. He said, if you're not sure to let someone go, ask yourself this. If they walked in tomorrow and gave their notice, would you feel relief? If the answer is yes, then you already know it's time. But I think for me, there were times where like I was like on the fence. I'm like, I don't know, should I fire them? Should I give them more time? What should I do? But I think that's a good question our listeners could ask themselves if they're not sure.
I think it's really challenging. And, I think I've erred on the side of continuing to hold up accountability and standards for what my expectations are. And in most cases, I've noticed that with adequate accountability, pressure, and reminders, some folks will just self select out. And I think for me, that's, you know, the best path. It's worked as the best path.
Yeah.
Layla Hermosi has a great podcast, and I think it's just called Build with Layla. And she talks about hiring tips, I guess. And one of the concepts that she introduces is hiring for diversity of thought, which is something that was a blind spot for me until I heard that, which is we hire people that tend to think like us. So if we're asking them, tell me about a difficult problem you had and how did you solve it? If they handle it in the way that we would have handled it, we go, I like them. They're good. I'm going to hire them. And instead, somebody might have a different way to approach the problem that maybe has the same or even better output. It's just not the way that we would have managed it. And so hiring for diversity of thought and diversity of role is important as well. As your practice grows, the role grows. The person that was a great practice admin at two clinicians is very different than the person that's a great practice admin at 200 clinicians.
That's so true. And I feel like, and don't forget that like roles change as you grow. And the person, like you said, who, when you were a team of 5 is not the same person that can lead a team of 20.
Yeah, I think that's so important just to keep that in mind as you change, that every person, assuming that they're wanting to work, is going to bring a different value to the table. And you have to be able to measure, is that going to work with our culture, with our vision? I really like the Colby indexes for that reason, or the predictive index, to understand people's work styles. Because I think for years I hired other quick starts that are like me. I'm a 9 on the Colby quick start. You tell me to do something, it's done by the end of the day. But having two quick starts, I mean, it's like that joke with Nate Bargatze. Like, if you have two visionaries in a marriage, two dreamers in a marriage, you're going to end up homeless the next day. Like
Yeah.
that's where we'll end up in practice if I hire someone that thinks like me. We're everybody's going to leave. I need someone that's actually a high what's the second one? It's a 4. Follow through. So I need someone that can see that vision and go, "Okay, I know what you're trying to do, but please don't roll this out to the team yet until I have a chance to meet with them, and we're going to need a 2-week trial so everybody can try this out. Please don't announce that we've moved EHRs tomorrow morning," which is what I used to do. So some of it is also measuring, knowing who you are. So taking those indexes and knowing who you are and how you work, and then knowing what complements that.
Yeah. And I think as a practice owner, your job is to notice when a role has outgrown the person or when the
Mhm.
person has outgrown the role, because then we have the courage to make the change. And sometimes we're the only person that in the practice that might see that. And sometimes that might mean promoting someone or restructuring or saying goodbye. But if you ignore it, really your business pays the price.
Mhm.
Agreed.
Yeah, and it's such a psychological toll for an introvert and a clinician to be in charge of people. And not every clinician is an introvert. I certainly am. And so when I'm around other people, it reduces my battery quick. And that could have been an old sort of hang up from being a therapist for so many years. I would always feel really drained at the end of the day because I think you're giving your all. You're totally attuned to what's going on with that person, subtle nuances. Do their eyes dart down to the ground? They seem off today. What's going on? You've got their whole life in your head as you're listening to them. And it takes a lot of energy. And I think that happens, at least for me and probably for others, when you're now working with your employees, is it'll drain that battery really quickly. And so you want to find people that either don't do that or fill you up, so to speak. They know how you work and they go, "Listen, I'm going to take this meeting. I don't think you need to be in it. I'm just going to have, Jim and I take notes and you just look at the notes. I think you just need to, please do your reports today," or whatever. Like I have a million reports that people are like, "Please just get those done." So having people that also know you and fill up your battery versus drain it is another key thing. And that's kind of along the lines of what Jen was saying is, after the interview, do you feel like, yeah, I would love to work with that person? I would be excited when I had a meeting with them to like just be like, "What's going on? How are you doing?" Versus if you feel like, "Oh, like thank God I'm done with that." That may not be a good pick.
That's so true. And I also think, something that I've come to realize over the years is, a lot of the folks that we're hiring are not cut from the same cloth as us. They're not destined to be group practice owners. That's just not something they're interested in, motivated to do. I think I myself learned through a teaching program, just kind of being dropped into a classroom after college as a classroom teacher, that taught me that I'm resilient and adaptable and I can rise to any occasion. It really did develop some leadership skills for me. But I realized like not everyone is up for that. Not everyone's, into learning on the job or just being dropped into a position and being told like go for it. Some folks need more coaching, more support, more hand holding, and because I'm different than that, it seems different, unusual, kind of weird to me. But the world's made up of all different kinds of folks, so I try to take that into account in my hiring process now. But it was a real realization
That's a really good point.
for me.
That's a really good point because again, you're hitting on that diversity of thought. If we assume everybody just wants to be left alone, like I want you to just hire me for the role and then say, like, "There's the goal,
Right.
go." No problem. Love it. But if you micromanage me and you check in with me every day, so we have to talk about how I'm getting to the goal, this is not a fit for me. I'm not a group project person. I can do the thing you need me to do, but I don't want to talk about doing the thing you need me to do. But there are people that's how they work. And that probably comes from some tribal ancestry, right? There are people that work great, like manically overnight, and then they hibernate for 2 months. And now we call them bipolar, but they were very effective
Yeah.
in short spurts of time. And there's also tribes of people that were really good talking together and figuring out how to kill that tiger. And then there were groups of people who were like, just go over there. I'm going to kill it. Just do something else. I'm going to kill a tiger. Right. So every person is sort of wired in a different way, and neither is good nor bad, but understanding how someone does their best. And that might be the interview question that you use, which is, if you were hired tomorrow, what would your onboarding look like to give you the best chance of success here? Are you meeting with someone every day and they're laying out clear expectations and giving you continual feedback about your work? Or are you given sort of a visual map, a goal, and then we check in with you in 30 days and you've done it?
I love that idea. That's great. I'm going to get a notepad out and write it down right now.
So should we maybe do the challenge and the close?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, listener challenge. Take one role in your practice and ask yourself, do I have systems and oversight in place for this person? Or am I just hoping this person will save me?
And if you're feeling that pit in your stomach about someone on your team, don't ignore it. That's your gut telling you it's time to act.
Thanks for hanging out with us on Off the Chair. If today's stories made you laugh, cringe, or nod in painful agreement, we'd love to hear yours. DM us on Instagram or drop a comment with your worst hire story. We might share it in a future episode. And next week, we're digging into the flip side, what it really takes to build a team you actually love leading. Until then, hire slow, fire fast, and protect your sanity first.